Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Maggie.
How much is your cell phone bill?
$23 a month.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Wait, who's your cell phone with?
Cricket.
You just changed, right?
No. It's been $23 a month for 5 years.
I feel like we had this conversation. Okay, I was halfway joking with you because for some reason I thought I remembered that it was a little bit higher. Okay. Also, I can't remember something we talked about like a week ago. Okay, we're going to talk about, I'm so excited about this topic. Like we're getting right past the pleasantries. We're jumping right into the topic.
Okay. I'm going to guess it's cell phones.
It's cell phones. But I will say, speaking of cell phones, before we get started, we have a quick favor to ask that involves your cell phone. Can you please take out your cell phone, which you may already be using to listen to us?
And Venmo us.
No.
Oh,
we don't want your money.
That? Okay.
We don't want your money. We want 1 or 2 minutes of your time. And we would love for you to take out your phone, pause the show if you need to. Wait till I say this, then pause the show. Open the Apple Podcast app. Find the Friends on Fire podcast. Even if you're listening on Overcast or Spotify or something else, open the Apple Podcast app. Find our show. Leave us a rating and a written review. It really, really, really helps other people to find our podcast, and it helps to support the work we're doing and to get more friends to talk about money and improve their finances. And we know that we're asking for, 1 or 2 minutes, perhaps 30 seconds if you're fast, of your time. And we just really appreciate it. And we would love for you all to do it. And thank you very much in advance for those of you that do take the time to leave us a quick written review on Apple Podcasts. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
That felt sort of on topic because we're talking about cell phones.
Okay, sure.
And you could pretty much only do that on a cell phone. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to, make a stretch and say that was, exactly. Okay. So we're talking about cell phones. We have done an episode on cell phones before, but we did it with like cell phones and utilities and like a bunch of things of like how to cut money off your bills. I don't remember what that episode was called, but we'll put it in the show.
Yeah, that was like 100 episodes ago.
That was like one of our...
Who remembers any of that?
I mean, actually now out of curiosity, I want to see what it was. Hold on. Because it was like something and cell phones. Oh, it was cell phones and TV and internet. Oh my, was the name of the episode.
Was it like
and
episode
that
20?
Was episode 21.
Whoa.
We were just little podcast babies.
We were
just
so
little
back then.
Newbies. We were so adorable. We didn't know what we were doing. We were in like a pandemic. It was just
weird times.
Crazy times. So we are much more mature and refined, and
I think we've certainly settled on our style. That's for sure. Whether it's refined or not, I'm not sure.
Something. Yeah, we've settled in. Okay.
All right, let's get into this episode, Maggie.
Yeah, we want to like specifically focus on cell phones today, and this was a little bit inspired by me needing to get a new cell phone plan. But I think if I like to like share the story, it's one of my favorite stories, and we share it a lot. So one of the first things that we ever, like when you and I became friends, finance friends, Mike, at work, and that's how we met. For those who are newer to the show, like Mike and I first met at work. He was my finance business partner. As a result of that, I felt like I should ask him for tax advice, which I did. And we realized we both had like, an interest in talking about personal finance and early retirement. And I learned about, Mike's parents early retiring and like his dream too, and all this stuff. And he heavily influenced my early retirement journey. So, but one of the funny things that would happen in that is like, we were kind of like each other's accountability partners. Well, you were pretty much my accountability partner. I don't think you needed an accountability partner. So it was like a one-way relationship at the time. You've since gained so much from me. Never knew you would get. But the funny thing is, I shared Mike convinced me to start expense tracking, which I had never done. And I would do it. And then we would like review them together. And he would look at my expenses, and he would constantly look at Greg's cell phone. I didn't pay for my cell phone because I only had a work cell phone. He would look at Greg's, and he had like an $80 cell phone bill. And he was always like, and it might have been like 80 or 90 or something. And he was always like, why is Greg's cell phone so much? And so a couple months in a row, I would come home to Greg and say like, hey, Mike said you're paying too much for your cell phone bill. And the first month, Greg was sort of like, who's Mike? Why does he keep talking? Why is he looking at our expenses? And I've kind of like told him about you, but at the same time, I think he's just like, when I came back the second month and I was like, look, Greg, last month, Mike said something you haven't done it yet. And Mike like wants to know why you haven't fixed your cell phone bill. He then is sort of like, why does Mike keep looking at our, it was just kind of funny. Now he's come to appreciate you and how much, how great you are and how much of an influence you've had on our finances.
And when we've done our spouse expense review, he gives it right back to us. He's looking at our expenses and providing feedback. So
anyways, you more than cut Greg's cell phone bill in half of the time. And he moved to prepaid with Verizon and saved a ton of money. And that's like a simple trick there, right? Of just, which we'll talk about, of moving to a prepaid plan with some of the big carriers. But I more recently had to get a new cell phone plan. I've had a company phone for almost 15 years, and the phone and the plan, I don't pay for it. And it's been, a great perk and benefit, but now I need to get my own because I was, leaving my company. And so I started doing a bunch of research. I put it on Instagram, asked all of our listeners for tips and advice on what cell phone carriers they like. And I was going to go with what Greg had in terms of prepaid Verizon, but I started looking and I was like, look, there's some better things out there that are even better than what he currently has. And so I thought we should do, and I think we asked our listeners on Instagram, like, would people appreciate a show on this topic? It was a pretty unanimous yes. And so here we are doing a show. So let's just start with this general point, Mike, that I would say, the average person from a lot of conversations I've had with people are paying somewhere between $50 to $100 for their cell phone plan. But in reality, you can easily get great service for $25, maybe a little bit more, depending on kind of what you need, which we'll talk about. Like you said, you're getting it for $23. I'm currently getting it for $25. And so we'll go through this and kind of just like talk about the options here and hopefully inspire everyone to take a close look at their cell phone provider and bill and see what they could do to change it up.
Now, Maggie, do you remember what my job was at AT&T?
You did something with pricing, didn't you?
Yes. I was director of pricing for a cell phone company.
That sounds important.
Yes. So all of this stuff we're going to talk about is like, if there's one thing that we have expertise on, we've done like 150 episodes. This is like the one thing I actually know a lot about.
Yeah, it's funny we've not done like a more detailed episode on this, given that.
And so that being said, I was very impressed with the research you did and the decision you made. You did an awesome job. So well done.
Maybe someday I could be the director of pricing for a major cell phone company.
You would hate it. It's all spreadsheets and analytics. Not your.
I would just be like, charge less. Okay, so our first, we're going to go through a bunch of things here, but our first topic real quick is, first you need to do a little bit of research and decide what you need from your cell phone provider, because it's hard to compare some of the things if you don't really know what you personally need.
So I think the first thing that's going to come to mind is just coverage. And honestly, all the carriers, and there's only 3 now, Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T. There's only 3 networks. So even though there's like a zillion different providers, there are 3 networks.
Like even Google runs off one of those 3.
Yeah, it runs off Wi-Fi or it buys coverage from the carriers. Everybody's kind of the same right now. We went through like 10 years of advertising where everybody was showing those stupid maps and people talking about drop calls. There is still some legacy impact from that, and people have these biases towards certain carriers, but right now they're all the same, honestly.
Do you think that has changed in the last 10 years?
Oh yeah, definitely. Okay. And definitely.
The reason I ask that is because you're right, of like people are remembering like old stuff. Like 10 years ago, I remember vividly that AT&T had terrible coverage like in my neighborhood. It was like a dead spot. And I had to switch to Verizon at the time. And it was like just super weird. It was just kind of like literally on like a few streets, a little bit of a dead spot. And like our house was, when you live in like an older, thicker, the walls are real thick. Like sometimes you get terrible coverage indoors. But I think that's pretty heavily changed. And even indoors, everything's running off Wi-Fi anyways.
Yeah, that's right. Now, you raise a good point, though, that even though generally all the carriers are the same and they have very similar coverage, and you're not going to have like a huge part of Atlanta that just doesn't have AT&T coverage or whatever, you might not get a good signal in your house, for instance. And that's because like these carriers have different wavelengths that work differently. They go through materials at different effectiveness. So you might get better Verizon coverage in your basement than T-Mobile. That's like a real thing. And it could be the same in your office. And so if you spend all your time in your office and in your house, like check those first, but don't worry about, which carrier's faster and which one has more coverage in metro cities all over the country. Like, don't worry about it. It's all the same.
They're so similar. Yeah. And I think, an easy way you can do that too, if you don't have the carriers, you've never had them, is like have a friend who's got one of them, like come over for an evening and kind of see what their service is in your house. Okay. I think the second one in terms of just research of what you need is figure out your data situation and how much data you truly need. So while there are a lot of plans that offer unlimited data usage, a lot of the discount providers that we're talking about, they have different priced plans for different amounts of data usage, and they put a cap on data usage. Some put a cap on data usage at a higher speed, and then they give you, unlimited at lower speed, but some truly do put a cap. And so you need to decide if you are willing to go with a plan that has a cap on data usage, or if you want an unlimited plan, because again, there's some pretty big price differences in some of the plans based on that decision.
And you do need to read the details when you're looking at these plans online, because almost all plans now have a cap on high speed and unlimited low speed. That's just like, that is the way the market has gone. Very few plans have a strict cap where you need to buy more data, but you need to like be really clear about what you're getting as part of that plan. So it will be written in pretty clearly.
That is interesting, Mike, because I didn't fully appreciate that. I didn't realize that a lot of these plans go to a lower speed, like in some examples of like Verizon plans that are capped at 5 gigs, for example, which used to be the plan Greg had. After he hits 5 gigs, he still gets to use data, but it goes down to like a 2G, like a really low, much lower speed level, essentially. One thing I will note, that's just a quick note, for anyone who feels like they have to have an unlimited plan and they're like, I need all this data. A lot of these plans that do have high speed data caps, there's some pretty simple things you can do today to better manage the volume of data you're using. And I'll share just a couple of them because I think it is helpful for people to understand. You can go with one of these plans that has a cap on them, on the data. Because again, I'll say 90, look, 70% of the time we're on Wi-Fi. Think about how often you are somewhere that has Wi-Fi versus when you're in your
all
car
the time.
and not. Yeah, I'm probably like, for my life right now, 90% of the time I'm somewhere with Wi-Fi. Every now and then I'm out in my car for, a quick amount of time. But even when I'm traveling, I'm in a hotel, it has Wi-Fi. I'm in a restaurant or cafe, it has Wi-Fi. I'm at a whatever. I'm at someone else's house, they have Wi-Fi. So the point is, when you're on Wi-Fi, you're not using that data because you're running off Wi-Fi. And then also like when Greg was on one of those plans, he downloaded his favorite music albums and lists in advance. So he was never streaming data. He just wasn't streaming things. He was frequently would like download podcast, books, music, et cetera, in advance. You can go on low data mode, low battery mode, which kind of does the same thing. You can change your settings to only download things over Wi-Fi. Don't let your kids use it as a hotspot and stream ridiculous stuff when you're out in the car. Like that's the kind of stuff that really eats up data. So anyways, there's a ton of tips out there. If you do end up we'll talk more about the plan options, but if you end up with going with a plan that has a data cap on it, I think it's important to understand there's a lot of ways you can manage that.
Also, when you are evaluating new cell phone providers, check the phone type and the compatibility. There are a few instances like Google Fi where you need to buy a certain type of phone that works with that carrier. But for the most part, any iPhone works with any carrier. Any Samsung Galaxy works with any carrier. You just need to unlock it. And the unlocking process used to be a big deal. It's
super easy now.
But I think the government got involved and now there's like an unlock website. It's probably like AT&T.com/unlock.
Yeah.
And you just type in your IMEI number and it just gets unlocked. It's super easy. I have done it so many times. So
and now a lot of companies are using eSIM cards. You don't even need a physical SIM card to switch over. And yeah, I think when you do think about your phone situation, like you mentioned Google Fi as an example, Google Fi works with an iPhone, but it's in like beta mode and it works better with Android devices. And so you just want to think about stuff like that as you're making your different considerations. And I think the last consideration you want to think about as you're thinking about your needs are just how many lines do you need? So a lot of almost all of the cell phone providers, the price gets cheaper as you have multiple lines. So if you're on a family plan with multiple lines, that might shift where you're going to get the best deal, whether you need one line or whether you need 4 lines. The prices can change between just the pricing strategies that some of the different providers have. And then the other thing on multiple lines, I know multiple kind of extended families. I think you do this with your family, Mike. Mm-hmm. It's like you and your parents or you and your sister are all
we have
the same.
six lines. My sister and her husband and both my parents and Britta and me.
And you just I don't know, Venmo or PayPal each other every now and then?
Yeah, we do it. We settle up in the fall every year. Nice.
I mean, I know some people my age that are like still on their parents' plan. Not knocking it. If my mom wants to pay for my cell phone bill, she's more than welcome to.
I should probably be mine.
I know. I should probably be paying for her cell phone bill. That'd be the nice thing to do. But anyways, point is you can get creative on the people you have in your plan. What I actually love, we'll talk about Visible later because I've recently switched to Visible. What I love about Visible is that they've given up on the number of lines doesn't matter. They have like anybody can make a quote party. You don't even need to know who you're kind of in a party with. And it's a great concept because it's kind of killed the idea that you need to have like family plans because there's so many workarounds like you do. I could have 4 of my friends and I all go on a family plan, but why go to that trouble? Why don't they just give us our accounts?
Yeah.
Let us all be adults.
Why don't these huge for-profit companies just make it easy for customers?
Why do they make me game the system for real? That's like Netflix coming out with, how Netflix is announced. Same idea of, okay.
So let's talk about the big difference and the big way to save. And that's prepaid versus traditional or what's called postpaid plans. Almost all carriers have a cheaper plan option if you go with their quote unquote prepaid. And just to clarify, this is when you pay $25 before you start your service versus getting a bill at the end of the month. That's postpaid.
Yeah, so it's a silly semantic of the first of the month or the 31st of the month. And hey, when you first were looking at our bill, not only were you saying Greg could have a cheaper cell phone bill, you weren't even he needs to go shop around. You were literally with Verizon, call them and switch from this plan to prepaid. It was you were making it so easy to say you can stay with the same company. You have to change nothing. You just call and switch to when they're billing you essentially. So because it's such a semantic difference between the first of the month and the 31st of the month, why is a prepaid plan cheaper? Why don't they just have that for everybody?
It's the same way that brand cereal versus generic cereal works or any product like that. It's all manufactured by the same group, but it's going to be sold in a different part of the store or a different store or targeting a different customer. And some people just like the experience of going into a really nice Verizon store and getting, the platinum package with, streaming ESPN or whatever they're offering this month. And that's what they are into. And other people are I don't care. Just give me a phone. I just want to call my parents on the weekends or whatever. And that customer difference type is who they are targeting. They're trying to increase the amount of reach they have with their products. So it's primarily a retail channel move. You have AT&T Store for your postpaid and your Walmarts for your prepaid. Very different type of customer.
Yeah, what's interesting about it too is when you're dealing with Verizon as an example and you are calling, you just call Verizon and you're trying to switch to a prepaid or something. It's you got to call a different department actually. And it is just fascinating. It's literally a different arm of the business that you've got to deal with.
Yeah.
Same company, different department, better price. I'll take the one that has the cheaper price, please.
Right. And not only is there going to be a Verizon postpaid, a Verizon prepaid, there's going to be a totally separate, non-Verizon branded prepaid program. And you know what that is?
What?
Visible.
Cricket? Oh, hey, is Visible actually owned by Verizon?
Yes, it is a Verizon company.
It's funny in the way that they sort of present it on their website. It's a little unclear because they talk about how they're on the Verizon network, but it's unclear if they're specifically affiliated because the branding is like totally different. But that's not there. I mean, Verizon also has prepaid plans in addition to an entirely different company.
So they are Verizon has their retail stores, which is going to be primarily postpaid. They're going to sell prepaid online and in Walmart and Target. And then they're going to have Visible, which is going to be an online only. They're all targeting different types of customers. They're all on the same network. They're all sort of the same thing. And that is the key. All of these cell phone companies, and there's like 50 of them, they're all on T-Mobile, Verizon, or AT&T. They're all sort of the same.
Yeah, it's so interesting because Visible sort of markets themselves as powered by Verizon. But then when you kind of read about them, like they are, like you said, they're actually owned by Verizon. They even say they're like all digital. Everything's app based. And it's like, there's no physical stores you could walk into, right? And that's how they keep their costs down. Okay. So speaking of cost down, let's actually shift to what we think are some of the best low cost cell phone carriers out there and different options. And here's the thing, we're not going to get into we're going to give some examples of like prices today, just to give you some comparisons of the types of the ranges of prices that are out there. But we didn't do like a detailed cost comparison because the prices are constantly changing.
Oh yeah,
the prices and the offers. Yeah. And so if we were to like do a detailed comparison, by the time this came out, somebody else would already be running a different promo. And it's not worth that level of detail. The point is, when you get to the point of doing this yourself, go and look at, back to the point we talked about in the beginning of like, what are your exact needs from a cell phone provider? Go and look at these different companies we're talking about. We'll put some links in the show notes to them. Go look at them and figure out what's best for your specific situation. So we'll give you some examples here also. And then the other tip I would say, as you're thinking about signing up with any of these companies, is make sure you're fully versed and researched on the different deals that they have running at any given time, because they're always running different promos. So even once you pick like, hey, I want to go with Visible, this month they're running different deals than they were running 2 months ago. And also consider offer stacking, because like when I signed up for Visible, I went in through Rakuten, which is formerly Ebates, and I got a better offer and cash back for my sign up, like bounty for my sign up through that. And I got an offer that Visible was running for new customers. And you got to kind of compare that to like one of our lovely listeners sent me a Visible referral link. And I almost used that until I realized my direct new customer offer from Visible was even richer than that referral link. And so you just want to look at all these deals and offers because they can be pretty valuable. And I'll give you another tip that I missed on this.
Okay.
They're so valuable that like, I was so excited to get a new phone. If you recall, I think I like put something on Instagram one day and was like, any tips on like getting a good deal on a new iPhone? And I really wanted like I wanted a new iPhone.
Yeah. Do you remember what my tip was?
Yeah. Buy an old one. Yeah.
You didn't listen to it.
No, I did not. This was like my buy a car episode. I was like, I kind of listened to you, but I was like, I haven't been able to have a new phone. I wanted the camera.
Yeah. You deserve it.
I haven't had one in 15 years and I deserve it. You know, It's my retirement gift to myself. I need it. Anyways, I bought a new iPhone 13 Pro and I love it. And it takes great pictures and it really made me happier and changed my life. So that aside, I just got so excited. I went and like bought it from Apple. And then I'm like, okay, I got to get this thing turned on. And I thought I was going to do Verizon prepaid. And then I found out something about their pricing that really annoyed me, which I can get into. As I'm signing up for Visible, I'm like, oh, you know what? They got a great offer when you buy the exact same iPhone through them. I would have gotten $100 off of it.
Ooh, bummer.
I know. And so I was like, and I could have gone through the trouble to like send my phone back to Apple. And I had already like hooked it up and stuff at that point. So it was too much work. But I just say that as in like, don't put the cart before the horse, like fully do your research. And then especially if you need to buy a new phone, because there can be some good phone offers for whatever phone, whether you plan to buy an older phone or a newer phone, especially a lot of these low cost ones have good deals on older phones too. If you're not bringing a phone with you to your plan. Okay. So let's rattle off some of the best companies that we have found. And a lot of these came from suggestions from Friends on Fire listeners for what we would consider like, low cost, but high quality. Because to your point, they're all on the same 3 big networks. And let's just talk a little bit about like how each of them are set up. Okay, let's start with Visible, because we were just talking about them. And that's who I recently went with. I'll give you my sales pitch on Visible and why I love them. And we'll put a link in the show notes. So Visible, again, everything we said about like it's running on Verizon, it's basically their kind of discount all digital service. Their only plan, they have like one plan. I love the simplicity of it. It is one line, unlimited data. That's their only plan. Doesn't matter whether you have one line, two lines, three. It's everything's the same price. The catch is, and the wording's a little funny, but your initial single line starts at $40 a month. Like that's your first month. But you can get it down to $25 a month per line when you have 4 or more parties. And let me define a party as part of your kind of network, if you will. And a lot of times, like on your family plan, Mike, on Cricket, you guys are all in the same billing, right? Like somebody is the master owner of that plan, right? Mm-hmm. And they've like set it all up and you got to like PayPal them or do whatever, it's like, and technically I think they might be able to like access your data and some other stuff. But on what's interesting about Visible is like, there's no account connection. Like you're sort of connected through like a referral network, but in terms of the way that they call a party, let me just simplify it by you can go onto their site and after your first month, they have these parties that already exist that have like 10,000 customers in them that you can join. So everybody after their first month can get to that $25 a month price forever. It's not like you need to know who's in your party. There's all these like Reddit and other parties that have been created that are kind of referral networks for Visible. I thought about starting a Friends on Fire party, but there were so many other existing parties, there was no need to. So the point is with Visible, and even through the introductory offers, you can get below $25 for your first month anyways. But the idea is it's $25 a month for unlimited data. The catch on Visible is their coverage outside the US just doesn't exist. It's not like you can add an international plan or international coverage, but we'll talk about that later because I don't care about that for a number of reasons. Mainly that international coverage is expensive to add to all of the different carriers. I have other approaches for how we plan to leverage, get coverage when we're traveling internationally anyways, which we'll talk about after we get through some info about the carriers. So look, I went into a little bit more detail on Visible because I think their model is fascinating, that it's just a single line, a single price for everybody. And there's not like 8 different, there's literally, that is their only offering. Everybody gets the same thing. Some of the other low-cost providers are Cricket, Mint, Prepaid Verizon, Prepaid AT&T, Tello, which is Tello, and then Google Fi. I'm going to kind of talk about all of these together because all of these have similar approaches, and except for Google Fi, which I'll get to Google Fi last. So if you look at Mint or Cricket or Prepaid Verizon, they all have a range of offerings. It differs based on the number of lines you want to add, and obviously, like the more lines you're adding, the less you're going to pay because it's kind of a bulk discount. But essentially they have different categories of like data usage. So Mint, for example, at 4 gigabytes a month, you pay a certain price. At 10 gigabytes a month, you pay a certain price. At 15 gigs, you pay a certain price. And then at unlimited, you pay a certain price. The catch on these plans that you need to kind of pay attention to when you do research them is a couple things. One, some of them have introductory pricing. So like Mint has introductory pricing of, as a new customer, unlimited is $30 a month for your first 3 months. But then after that, it goes up to $35 a month. And the prices just change depending on kind of like the length of what you sign up for, which kind of remind me of the olden days when you had to like almost sign up for a contract, right? Remember that? And it was like so expensive to break a cell phone contract.
Oh yeah, terrible.
That was like the olden days. Back when we were in our 20s. If you don't want to be capped on your high-speed data usage, like Cricket's unlimited plan is $55 a month for unlimited for one line. That's why I really like Visible, because it's less than half that price for the same service. Now, Mike, for example, when you said yours is like $23, that's because you're in a family, you've got like 6 lines on Cricket, right, and you are capped. You're probably on the 5 gigabyte plan to be paying
we're
that
on
rate.
12 gigabyte plan. It's a
nice.
legacy plan. It's not.
I was going to say
anymore.
they don't even market that anymore. But the point is, and a lot of times you can end up on legacy plans on these too, that they'll kind of honor something that you're grandfathered into. The point is, pay attention to the number of lines, the data cap, and all of that, and just decide what makes sense for you. And then the other thing is, we'll shift into talking about international because it's related to Google Fi. Google Fi is an interesting offering in the sense that it's really attractive if you want unlimited coverage with full international access at no extra charges. Because a lot of these, all these cell phone providers, whether they're kind of what's considered like a discount carrier like Mint or Cricket or Visible, or whether it's like Verizon or AT&T, they all don't include international coverage. They have different packages where it's like $5 per amount of data that you use, or it's an amount of time, like it's, X amount for a whole month of international coverage added onto your plan or something like that. And it can get really expensive. Like if you do the math on how much they charge for international data, it's like a by day plan. It can get like really expensive with some of the carriers. So Google Fi is attractive if you travel internationally extensively and you just want unlimited data. It's $70 a month for one line, unlimited international coverage on Google Fi as an example. So again, that's way high. If you're mostly in the US, that's way more than you need to be paying for a cell phone. But if you do travel a lot, that could be an interesting setup and deal for you.
But there are still cheaper ways to do this because international calling is a huge business for domestic carriers because the cost to go purchase those minutes or those megabytes on other networks is cheap. So they're making a ton of money, which means there is a cheaper option for you as a consumer. And Maggie, the thing that you and I are doing in Europe this summer is we have mobile hotspots. We're buying local SIMs, which are cheap. You can get like a 25 gigabyte local SIM for $20 that lasts a month. I mean, this is not expensive stuff.
Yeah.
Plug that into that Wi-Fi hotspot and then all of your phones are connected. You have Wi-Fi calling. You can send your iMessages. It's like no different.
Yeah. To be clear, you can do either or. You don't need both. You can either like rent a Wi-Fi hotspot when you're traveling internationally.
Oh, good point. So,
or you can buy a local SIM. You don't need to do both. You're double dipping.
We are doing the hotspot because then we get to our numbers still work.
Yeah.
And we can receive calls normally. You can just put a different SIM card in your phone. You get a new number and then it works.
The downside of, just to be clear, the downside of that like $20 SIM card, like you're talking about, is you just temporarily take out your old SIM card, put in this international SIM card. The downside of that is you temporarily lose access to your US number and texting.
Right. No one's going to get a hold of you.
Yeah. So it might be good if
Maybe
you're
that's
on vacation
what you want, right?
and you don't want to hear from anyone. But we've done the same thing, Mike. Like when we were in Ireland a couple of years ago, we rented a hotspot for 2 weeks and you can pick them up at the airport. You can reserve them in advance. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. But it's super great because you basically have Wi-Fi anywhere you are and you keep your same number, everything works as normal, and you can like let your kids use the whole family can use it, which is nice. Mm-hmm. So I'm a big fan of like renting the hotspots. And it's not, I think in my experience, it is cheaper than trying to add any sort of international coverage through any of these plans. And that's why when Greg and I just recently both moved to Visible, sounds like an ad for Visible. It is not. We don't care that it's US only coverage because everywhere else we will go will have coverage. And another example is like we're like going to be in Mexico later this year. And we were like, well, will we get a hotspot there? Will we do a SIM card? And Greg was like, we're going to be at a hotel, but we're going to be at a resort most of the time and they have Wi-Fi. So do we really, like, we're on vacation. Right. Do we really care? If like for an hour between landing and getting to the hotel, we don't have a cell phone. Like we used to get by for, decades in a world like that. We'll be okay for an hour.
Yeah.
And we'll be around a ton of other people if we have an emergency and need to, call somebody.
Yeah. Some other sucker that's paying for an international plan.
I know. Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So we've gone on about this for a little while. The point here is you can save a lot of money on your cell phone, and we encourage people to really, look at what you're paying and rethink this. So let's jump into our top 3 takeaways.
All right, Maggie. First key takeaway. If you are paying more than $40 a month for your cell phone plan, you're likely paying too much.
Exactly. Number 2, do a little bit of research or accept somebody else's research, like what we've done here for you today, right? And make a change to save some money. So it doesn't take long. Like I spent maybe an hour researching these different plans and realizing that for us, Visible was the best option that we could get to.
And don't get sucked into the clever marketing, because there are teams of people dedicated to creating such complexity around this product that you will end up paying more and it won't really be your fault. It is a commodity product though, and you're going to get the same service from everyone. So try your best not to pay too much attention to how it's being marketed to.
Okay. Well, I hope, as usual, that this was helpful. Thank you so much for listening. If you've been challenged or inspired by what you have heard from us today, please rate and review the show. And you can also subscribe to make sure that you never miss an episode.
If you have any thoughts or questions, we'd love to hear from you, and you can leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370 or hit us up on Instagram.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Maggie.
Bye.
Bye.